Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled HOA threatens to deforest your property, threaten them back with giant swastikas. My parents live out in the sticks, about an hour from the nearest major city. They were hippies back in the day and had taken to the off-the-grid lifestyle pretty well. They bought a bunch of land as an investment, but after half a decade it barely changed in appraisal, so they decided to live on the property instead. It ended up being where I grew up. After I moved out and started my own life elsewhere, a housing development moved in nearby, selling a similar lifestyle. They bought hundreds of acres and split everything up, building homes and selling them off to city folk looking for an escape. These lots completely surrounded my parents' larger property. Of course, they established an HOA and tried to get my parents to sign in and join a number of times. They put their little clubhouse right next to them and had their fancy entrance run right alongside their property. Fast forward 5-ish years, my parents still have not joined. The neighborhood ended up being pretty successful and the HOA is pretty loaded, so they added a church with a giant cross out front, a gym, a pool area, an outside theater thing and a little park, but are now running out of room on their lot of land. Skipping over some details because this post is already long, basically the HOA board members were dicks to my parents this whole time. I think they were trying to get them to either join or leave to buy the land, whichever came first. They called their property an undeveloped eyesore and tried everything they could to make their lives hell for no apparent reason. My parents kept to themselves and never bothered any neighbors. Latest update, my parents gave in. They signed the bylaws and joined the HOA. I don't know why, they don't seem to know why, but they signed the papers and within the week had 4 letters threatening fines and fees if the parts of the property closest to their clubhouse were not cleaned up, aka deforested. Being nature lovers, my parents didn't want their entire property to be grass and nothing else. They liked the woods and my mom even cried about not being able to see the usual squirrels and birds from her porch if this happened. They felt they would move before complying, however they signed the agreement and that was that. When I visited, I read through everything and found some loopholes. One of them was a landscaping clause that had appeared in the last 5 years, long after every other property had been cleared and cleaned of nature, requiring that each plant on the property be identified and pre-approved for removal before it can be removed, to preserve endangered species apparently. So I hired a botanist from the local college, $1,000 to come and identify the plants on the property and give a rough count, much better than the $6,000 being threatened in fines. Only $2,000 was actually threatened, but reading through everything they technically could find more and ended up sending more fines later. And by the way guys, who would have thought that a botanist would earn so much money? I guess I picked the wrong major in university. Anyway, 88 unique species identified and by rough estimates over 1,000 plants that fell into their category of requiring pre-approval. The next day I set about sending them hundreds and hundreds of emails for each plant to be removed one by one, everything from tiny saplings to 50 feet birch trees, most with pictures and the reference botanist's report for verification. I got 2 emails back for approvals of small bushes before they stopped. I kept sending them emails, at least 700 were sent before one of the board members called my parents to talk about it. Instead of backing down, they offered to expedite it and pre-approve everything to be removed. Not what we wanted, but I called their bluff and agreed. I explained this was perfect as I could now fill the property with giant swastikas even sooner than anticipated. What? Yes, I said, I would like to put swastikas on my property and getting rid of the forest will make them more visible from the road, clubhouse, pool and park, all alongside our property. I could even use the wood from the chopped trees to make a giant swastika the same size as their giant cross, 10 plus feet.
You cannot do that.
That is discriminatory. My parents are Jainists. And by the way guys, Jainism or Jainism, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, is an ancient religion from India. And the swastika is a holy symbol for that religion and has been long before the Nazis. Section 2 of SB 1588 allows any religious symbol to be placed on one's property, and the HOA is not legally allowed to do anything about it. Don't worry, I said, the swastikas will have little dots in them so people know it is not for Nazis. Even if it were though, First Amendment and all.
Let me call you back.
They call back and say the HOA board dictator is going to come over and talk about it. We went back and forth for like an hour about what exactly defines a reasonable change on the property, but eventually he actually backed down. They agreed my parents' property could be grandfathered in and would stop sending letters of intent to fine about the forested areas. My parents still get annoyed with minor problems all the time, mostly related to trash days and their driveway, but it is mostly subsided. Moral of the story: if privileged, power-tripping Karens are fining your parents for their lifestyle, threaten giant swastikas. And you know guys, all these HOA stories got me thinking, does something like this actually exist in Thailand? And actually I would say it does kind of exist, because pretty much all of the Thai middle class lives in something called mubans, which are essentially gated communities, often with a security guard in front of it with fancy houses. And honestly, most of the houses in these gated communities look pretty similar, but I think that most of the residents there are pretty happy to live there. And they don't really have something like a committee that hands out fines and everything, because I don't think that would really fly with most of the Thai people. And the next one is titled, How I Made My Neighbor Leave Me Alone. I was recently reminded of a petty revenge I enacted about 10 years ago. At the time I lived in an apartment with my wife and 2 tiny kiddos. The way the apartment was configured, my front door faced my neighbor's front door. This apparently inspired their 10-year-old daughter to spend her days messing with us. Some of her greatest include, but are not limited to, throwing rocks at my door and closing her door as a type of doorbell ditching, I suppose. Putting empty boxes by my door, knocking and closing her door. The boxes had her address and apartment number, real smart. Being noisy and also banging on our shared walls. These were nearly daily occurrences. Being young and this being my first apartment, I didn't want problems with my neighbors, so I just put up with it. My apartment manager didn't care enough to get involved, even if I had reported it. I went over a month without hot water because she didn't care to get it fixed. The kids' parents never seemed to be around. They might have worked nights, not sure, but either way I couldn't talk to them. I put up with all the shenanigans for quite a while, until one day I noticed my van had been scratched, and not accidentally. Childlike handwriting scratched into my door that said something like,
"You're gonna die."
Now I am angry. One thing you need to know is the neighbor's window is always open, always. Every time I walk by I can hear the USA channel playing NCIS repeats. I also know the little girl spies on us through that window. So me and my wife share a knowing head nod towards the open window and proceed to talk loudly about how the little girl is always messing with us and she probably keyed our car and how we should call the cops on her. Not 20 minutes later, she knocks on our door and apologizes for messing with us and says she will leave us alone. We tell her we appreciate her apologizing and that all is forgiven. She never messed with us again. And guys, if you have watched until here and enjoyed the stories about crazy neighbors, then please don't forget to give me a boatload of star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one was posted by user Little Red Psycho in our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it is titled Mess with the Neighborhood's Friendly Sasquatch and you will get his witch of a daughter. And yes, this is a revenge story. Sorry if this is long, a bit of backstory. My dad was in the Marines and is the nicest guy you will ever meet. It is very hard to get him mad and he ends up getting walked all over by people, but when he does get mad, you better start running. He is tall, but is only the second shortest male in his family, very hairy, and is from the northwest of the US, where there are stories of Sasquatch, so I will call him Baby Sasquatch sometimes because of that. I'm the only one of his 4 bio kids that didn't get his height. I am also number 7 of 8 kids in total. I am of the Wiccan belief and have my mother's attitude and pettiness. We have lived in this neighborhood since I was about 2 years old and my dad had made friends with most of all neighbors. The house next to us on the right side being a rental house, and so the neighbors would change every few months to maybe 2 years. So my dad at least made it a point to be nice and help anyone living there if needed, but knew it might not last long. So enter a single middle-aged extreme Christian mom that I will call CM for short. CM's son was a teenager and a creep CS, important later on. At the time this took place, my parents were not long together and I was in middle school and started developing, and I guess by that OP means puberty, back in the 4th or 5th grade, and CM had lived there for about 4 months. My bedroom was in the basement with only one small window with a brush outside of it, making it hard to see in or out of it on the side of the rental house. CM had been flirty with my dad and showing off her body to him the best she could, to the point she might as well have been stripping in front of him, but my dad, being the man that he is, didn't pay no mind to it and didn't think anything of it. He helped her fix some things and moved things in while she tried to seduce him and showed that she could be mine and my little brother's, he is only 4 years younger than me, new mom, but it never worked and we never liked her. CS has been looking in my bedroom window trying to catch me naked. I couldn't prove nor see who it was for the longest time because the brush would block my view when they would run away. I kept most of my Wiccan stuff in my room on display, so it was obvious that I was a witch. One day I set up a camera while doing some lawn care and caught CS looking in my window, and it even looked like he was trying to get in it at night. I slept with a radio on at the time and wasn't able to hear him trying to come in. When my dad got home from work, I told him about what CS had been doing and showed my dad the video. He went from being on the verge of falling asleep to being pissed off and storming to CM's house. My dad told her that if CS, which by the way obviously guys is the son of the crazy neighbor, ever did it again, she shouldn't be surprised if he went missing. CM defended CS by saying,
"He is a boy and a teenager, he's going to be doing stuff like that. And you should know, since you were one yourself.
And that I
should just get used to it, since it will happen a lot to you."
Which angered my dad to the point that he raised his voice, which sounds like he is yelling to those who have never heard him actually yell, and told her, "That is not how boys act. They should be respectful and mindful and should not be peeking in young girls' bedroom windows." She then restored with,
"Well, maybe, if you did a better job of raising her in the way of God and being a better father to that heathen child, I wouldn't feel like I need to be a mother to her and have my son try and take her heathen stuff away from her."
I was now pissed off over the fact she called my dad a bad father, which he was far from, since he was a Christian man that accepted his bisexuality and he accepted who I am and my religious beliefs. I am also a major daddy's girl, so hearing this, I made my dad stop before he did or said something that he would regret. He agreed and we went home and completely nailed down all the basement windows, as well as a few others, and made sure that they were completely covered so you couldn't see in them. I stayed up hatching a plan and even called my oldest sister Kay, who CM has met, and told her what had happened and my plans. CM had started putting up signs in our yard that said,
"Heathens live here. They are nothing but liars here, and God have forsaken them. Please pray for their souls,"
and stuff like that, which only fueled me more to do this. It took me a few weeks to get everything we need for it, but once it was done, Kay went to all the other neighbors except one with a box and a letter explaining what was going on and what I needed them to do. Kay even went to the cop 2 blocks down that had become friends with my dad and really liked him. The one she didn't go to, I went to. He was a very nice old man and my siblings and I would help him whenever and however we could. I told him what was going on and he got upset, something I've never seen from him before, and he asked me what I needed from him. I had asked him if I could use his yard. It was very big and spacious, and I told him my plan and he agreed. I told him if he wanted to join in fully, he would need this, and handed him a box. In the boxes were homemade cloaks for each family member and black candles. The whole neighborhood knew I was a Wiccan and didn't care, which I was happy about since we lived in a small Christian town. So on the night of the full moon, while my dad was working and when I knew CM would be driving home with CS and would have to pass us, we all very creepily gathered in the old man's yard, and he sat near the sidewalk greeting everyone. She must have seen it very late because she stopped out front, hitting her brakes so hard we could hear the tires screeching. The old man tried to stop her, saying she wasn't one of our sisters and therefore could not join in. CM didn't care and just pushed past him with CS following behind her, slightly scared. She pushed her way past a small group and towards the front where she found me. She demanded to know what we were doing. I just looked at her with excitement and said, "Good, you and CS are finally here." She was confused and I then stepped up on a step stool and announced to everyone, "Our sacrifices for tonight are here and we can begin the ritual." She looked at me horrified and asked me,
"What ritual?"
I told her that every few decades we do a ritual to keep us from aging. She started to freak out and told me I must be lying to her. Little did she know that Kay was hiding and signed the cop to do his part. He pulled up with his sirens and lights on and she looked relieved to see him. She started to tell the cop her version of things and asking for him to help her. He looks at me and said, "High Priestess, would you like me to restrain the sacrifices for you?" And she started to freak out even more, begging for us not to kill her or her son, and the cop looked at me and then looked at them and said, "Fine, we won't kill you guys, but you have to swear that you will leave the High Priestess and her family alone, and that goes for your son as well." She agreed and then grabbed her son and left so fast we could see the trail she left. Everyone laughed and then went their own ways. The cop told me that in case they break their promise, we should call him. After that we did have a neighbor cookout since we were all together, which was nice. CM and CS ran away every time they saw us and she moved shortly after in fear for her life. I didn't tell my dad about what really happened until years later, and he was happy that the neighbors would do something like that for his family and told me that would explain the theme my whole block did for Halloween that year. They did not want the cloaks I made to go to waste. And I gotta admit, that was a pretty genius and very satisfying revenge story. Thank you so much for posting it on our subreddit. And to you, the viewer, if you have any interesting stories to share, please feel free to also post them on r/ripe stories on Reddit, because there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. Thank you so much in advance. And the last one is also from r/ripe stories, but it was posted by user thefoxtrot86 and it is titled, "Man trespassed on family property, my sweet lovable dog chased him across the yard." I saw earlier that a story was posted about a sweet dog that turned into a hero when thieves tried to break into a house. My story is not as good, but it is not bad. Years ago, I owned a really big lovable dog named Buck. He was a half Newfoundland, don't know what the other half was since he was a stray I took in. He was a great dog and was always friendly to other animals and children. By the time he was around 5 years old, he turned into a protector against coyotes and even broke up cat fights. If he heard an animal in distress, he would go running to help. In fact, I would see him leave on a patrol down towards the woods and come back an hour later or so. He was great at scaring off predators. But he never usually had an issue with people. Kids absolutely loved him and he never so much as nipped at one of them. Then, around the time Buck was about 8 years old, I noticed he was a bit more protective of the main property. If someone walked past the gate, I would hear a low growl from him, but he would still go back to being a lovable pooch to anyone if he thought they meant no harm. Then one day, a man trespassed on our property to look at a classic car that I had parked in my driveway. He claimed he was just there to look at it, but he still trespassed without permission. This was apparently the green light for Buck, as my stepdad suddenly heard yelling and opened his front door just in time to see that moron running across the yard with my dog barking and nipping at his heels. My dad got Buck to back off and the man apologized before leaving. He never came back. I loved that dog with all my heart, and when he passed in 2015, I cried for the first time in years. Rest in peace, Buck. You were a fantastic dog and I could not have asked for better. And ripe stars, unfortunately, we have reached the end of this video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless YouTube playlists, which should pop up on the left side of the screen in about 10 or 20 seconds. These playlists should definitely keep you busy, and I would really appreciate if you could listen to them before going to sleep. This would help my channel tremendously. If you still cannot get enough, then please don't forget to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you won't find on YouTube. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching.